All right, now welcome back to the channel. The title of this video is my #1 tip for green giant arborvitaes, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into that because people on YouTube don't like to wait for a whole video of blabbering on. So there will be some blabbering if you want to hear other information, but the #1 tip for these green giants is to never cut the main leader off of these plants. You don't want to top them. Leave that main leader intact all the time. If you want to go from something like this to a 30-foot tall plant, you got to know how to trim these things. So my #1 tip on trimming and basically the life of these plants is to how to trim. Trim the sides, leave the top so you get that nice conical triangle pyramidal shape. You always got to leave that top leader in. We're going to show some footage of some plants after I'm done rambling on here for a few minutes. And I'll show you some examples of this, and then a plant that's about a year old, and then how they look when they're fully grown. And I'll show you how that leader kind of changes over time and what to look for when trimming that. And I have a couple of examples of some plants that are a year old that I actually did trim the top off, and what happens, it has to reestablish a new leader, and you end up with one of these side branches becoming a leader, and you really want the main stem of that plant to be a tree trunk. You don't want to have a side branch, if you can avoid it, to be the main lead at all costs. So that's the main tip, is how to trim these things and trim around the edges and avoid the double tops. When these edges start coming up and they're even and you start seeing these edges wanting to take over, you trim the sides off and leave that main one alone. Okay, so you got to learn how to trim these things. It's very important. Other than that, the maintenance is very low key on these. A little bit of water, maybe some mild fertilizer once a year or so, but just make sure they don't dry out in a drought. That's just basic stuff. Just give them a little water, maybe a little fertilizer earlier in the year. And you don't want to give them a bunch of nitrogen probably right before the winter, because then they put out a bunch of tender, soft new shoots, and that'll get frostbit. So it's best to fertilize earlier in the year and let them go with that all season long. But I digress. I have learned so much about cloning these type of plants over the past 3 years. To just give you a little history, I have real extensive knowledge on cloning the herbs there. And that is a whole different deal from these green giants. I mean, I thought I had cloning all figured out, and I can get 100% success rate on the smaller herbs and plants like the flowering plants. These are a total different deal, and I think there's even some like flowers and things that are different. Now, I started cloning right about year 2000, and back then I started with an anti-transparent spray, and I'll put a link in the description. I think the brand I used was called Wilt-Proof, and there's no sponsors here or anything, but I will put a link if you want to look at the product and buy it. But I think those anti-transparents would be ideal for green giants, and I have not used them yet, but it would be a great product for these, I think. And what that is, it coats. It's a spray that you spray on when you take a clone, and it's basically like a wax or a seal that covers the plants so they can't transpire and lose water out of their pores, the stoma and all that. So it just basically seals them in, and all that moisture is inside the plant. It can't leave. That's how I started cloning. And now I think that stuff is actually considered organic, but if you're going to be putting it on consumable plants and things, I got away from doing that because you can put those plants in a moisture dome and seal in the moisture in a very humid environment and use no extra products and have no residues or anything. So it's even a more 100% organic way. So I got away from the wilt-proof, but on something like this, a decorative ornamental, evergreen that you're not going to be eating or smoking or anything, the wilt-proof would probably be a great product. So I would recommend trying that. And this is this is what I'm getting into here. I'm rambling on a lot, but it takes years and years of experience to do cloning. Last year, I took clones in December to try to do a project and work with getting those clones in December and see if they would be ready by March or April. It didn't work. I brought them inside. I put them in an aquarium. They did get a little dry 1 week period. I put a note on my refrigerator to water these every week or two, and I came down 1 week and the soil was dry, so that's the only thing that happened is they got dry for a few days. But when I took them outside in March, they were just crispy and dead and dry. They were green, but they were just no roots and crispy dry. So I see people, they say you can clone in winter. Up here, I'm in Kentucky, and we get some cold weather. It gets down in single digits. We get a lot of snow sometimes, 6 inches of snow a couple times a year, and it stays cold under 30 degrees for long periods of time. If you were down south in Alabama, Florida, southern Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, you might be able to get away with taking the plants in the wintertime. But up here where it gets cold, I haven't had success with that yet. So like I said, this takes years and years of experience. You only get one shot at it every year to do that in the winter. So if you want to do an experiment in the winter, it's a 1 year thing. You can try it and then try it again the next year. I'm doing that this year. I took clones in September, and because I think I am going to probably bring those clones in when it starts getting first frost, because I have another project here, some flowers, and I'm going to have a little fluorescent light going all winter anyway, so I might bring them in and try that again. But the clones were taken in September. So there's all kinds of different things you can do for these clones. With the green giants, they like to be in the shade. When you take a cutting, I started out and I was putting them out in the sun in a moisture dome, and that dome was baking, getting 130 degrees inside there, fried them out. I tried to take the dome off, and the direct sunlight was also frying them. These things, they like to be in the shade, on a back patio, in a shaded area, out of the wind. Just kind of ambient light is how they do best. I've had the best luck early in the spring taking them and then letting them root and kind of get established all year. So this year we do have the September project going. But anyways, I just kind of was rambling on about the cloning there. Like I said, I'm not a know-it-all. I'm doing experiments all the time, and it takes years to learn, and there's all different kinds of flowering plants and trees and shrubs and woody bushes and herbs and all of these different cloning. Some are more delicate than others. The flowers like to be in the sun, don't need a moisture dome, some of them. Some of the herbs, you have to put them in a moisture dome or use that wilt-proof spray. The green giants, they like to be in the shade, and I think the wilt-proof could be a good addition. So I've been over all that. I'm just kind of rambling on. The number one tip, though, is to not cut off this top. So I'm going to cut to some footage now of some plants that I'm growing outside and show you how I kind of trim these things and what they look like when you trim the top, when you clone them. Because a lot of people I've watched on YouTube, they take cuttings and then they'll just come in and cut them all back to where they're just little stubs, and then you lose your top. You lose that one trunk that comes all the way up. When they come alive, then they start bushing sideways, and then you have to reestablish a main leader, and it's one of these side branches. It's not the main trunk anymore. No good. Don't like it. No bueno. I have a couple bushes like that. We're going to cut to that right now. I'm done rambling here, so let's cut to this footage of the bushes, and I'll kind of just do some voiceover and show you about trimming these things. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we go. Okay, we've moved outside, and here is my September project. These clones I'm going to leave outside until the first frost, before the first frost. And I think I am going to bring them inside my basement and try them under a fluorescent light. Try not to let them dry out this year. But you can see I left the very tip top of these on. So they're intact, fully plants. I left them a little more bushy this year. I didn't trim them back real hard. I'm going to see how that does. It is a little bit tough on them. They need the roots to sustain that, but as soon as they get roots, then you could kind of trim them back on the sides, leave that top leader. Now those three on the right are the ones I had inside, And those are the last 3 from this year. So those are actually the scrawniest ones. They're not rejects, they all have roots, but those are the smallest clones from the batch that I took this year. And I'm just showing you here how I left the tips on those new clones. So moving right along here, these 2 plants are they're a year old. They've been in the ground for a year, and then I took them as clones, whatever, several months before that. I can't remember, but they've been in the ground all year. It's September, and you can see how much they've grown. Now, you can see the bushiness in the bottom of that plant. That's because I took the top leader out of these plants, and they have established a new leader, and I've been trimming the tips of the leaves. I'm trying to show here. You can see that main leader sticking up at the top there behind my hand, and you can see the leaves around the side where I have been trimming them back to get them to bush and fill in, and also so that those side branches don't take over and become the new leader and try to take over the dominance. So we'll show down in here on the inside of this one, and it has developed a little bit of an S-curve, so I think I also need to put a stake in there and make sure I keep that main trunk straight, give them some support and keep them straight. I'm not overly concerned about these plants because they don't need to be 40 feet tall. If they just kind of grow up and get 10, 12 feet tall, that's all I need out of those. That should be fine. That's another story, but you can see how I need to straighten that trunk, maybe give them some support, and you can see how bushy they are inside. Now, never mind all those weeds. I've already been pulling them about 4 times. They keep coming back this year. But I'm showing you that plant there, and that one really did bush hard on the inside, and you can see that it had to make a new leader, and that new leader is coming from just one of those bushy little branches that was kind of the most dominant one. But that's what happens when you trim the sides. They get real bushy in there, and they start growing all over the place, and you want to keep them like a tree and have a main trunk. So here you can see the tips where I have been trimming so they didn't take over, and that's what's going on here. So now this is the final stage, and you can see there's your main tips still going. They shoot up and get real tall. I mean 2-3 feet long once they get mature. And those are, those are old trees, but I'm just showing what the tips look like then. And that's how they go. I can't get up there to trim those anymore. They are on their own. But I just wanted to show y'all all the stages of growth there and what happens. So once they get that tall, they seem to do pretty well. Now that one does look like it's trying to get a little bit of a double top right there, if you could see that. I would like to get on a ladder and try to trim that right side branch off if I could, but that is about 15-20 feet up there. So anyways, thanks for watching.